All right, today we're diving deep into one of South Asia's most chilling legends. We're going to explore a figure that's not just terrifying, but also tragic, and maybe, just maybe, a symbol of justice. Let's get into it. You guessed it, it's the churl. And that one bizarre, unsettling detail, her feet literally facing the wrong way, is just the beginning of a story that's way more complicated than your typical ghost tale. It's a feature that's meant to trick you, to mislead you, and to trap you. So, let's start with the classic image of the churl, the one that's been fueling nightmares for centuries. What exactly is this creature and why is she so deeply feared? The legend of the churel is thought to have roots in Persia, describing the spirit of a woman who died with her desires unfulfilled. From there, the idea spread like wildfire across India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and beyond. She's considered a revenant, which is basically a ghost that's returned from the dead. But the key here is that she's an unpurified one, which usually means her death was considered ritually unclean. Remember that detail? It's going to be really important later on. This right here perfectly captures the whole terrifying trick of the churel. She is an absolute master of deception. She can appear as a stunningly beautiful woman, luring unsuspecting men she finds on lonely roads, but her true form, it's the stuff of nightmares. Monstrous, with claw-like hands, a black tongue, and sometimes even a pig's face with fangs. And of course, there are always those backward feet. That's the one telltale sign. So if you see her footprints and you try to run away from them, well, you might just be running straight into her arms. So what's her motivation? What drives her? Well, according to the folklore, it's this bottomless, insatiable hunger. She preys on men, especially young men, and drains them of their blood, their semen, their actual life force, until they just wither away into old age and die. It's this terrifying drive born from desires that she never got to fulfill in her own lifetime. And this is where the story gets really interesting and takes a sharp turn. Because the churel isn't just some random demon that hangs out in the woods. The legends are actually very specific about how she is made.
Yeah, it's so important to understand this. A churl isn't born, she's created. And her creation story is rooted in some serious tragedy and trauma.
So across South Asia, the belief is pretty consistent. A woman becomes a churel after dying a traumatic or so-called improper death. This could mean dying during childbirth, while pregnant, or during what was seen as a period of impurity, like during menstruation or in the days right after having a baby. Basically, she is the spirit of a woman who suffered terribly and was denied a proper, peaceful end. Her rage, it's born directly from her pain. And this fear, this absolute terror of the churel was so intense that it led to some very real and often pretty brutal rituals that were all designed to keep her spirit from ever rising again. Now, this is a huge deal. It's a massive departure from tradition. In Hinduism, cremation is meant to free the soul, to let it move on to its next journey. But for a woman who people feared might become a churel, they did the exact opposite. They buried her. Not as a sign of respect, but to literally trap her vengeful spirit in the ground. And this slide just lays out how deep that terror ran. The rituals were incredibly graphic. The Aryan tribe would sew the woman's eyes shut with thorns, break her limbs, and hammer pins into her hands and feet. Then they'd bury her face down. The idea was that if she tried to claw her way out, she'd only dig herself deeper into the earth. And scattering mustard seeds? That was another trick. The spirit would supposedly be compelled to stop and pick up every single tiny seed, a task so impossible it would keep her busy until sunrise. Other communities had their own gruesome methods, nailing fingers and toes, piling the grave high with thorns and heavy stones. It's just a powerful and really sad statement about how a woman who was a victim in life continued to be violated even after death, all because people were terrified of her potential power. So all of this brings us to a more modern way of looking at this myth. What if the churel isn't just a monster? What if she's actually something else entirely? In recent years, a lot of people have started to re-examine the churel legend through a feminist lens. And from this perspective, she becomes a symbol of female rage. She's the terrifying consequence of a society that mistreats and abuses women, denying them any power in life. Her monstrosity is a direct reflection of the monstrous things that were done to her. A perfect example of this is the incredible film Bulbul. It totally retells the origin of a churel. She's not just some random evil spirit. She's a woman who, after being brutally victimized, is reborn as a kind of divine force. And in this story, she doesn't just hunt anyone. She specifically hunts the men who harm women. The monster becomes a dark protector, a terrifying agent of justice for those who have no one else.
This kind of reimagining leads us to a really fascinating and kind of provocative comparison. It's one that really blurs the line between what we call monstrous and what we call divine.
Now, check this out. It's a fascinating parallel. On one side, you've got the Churel, a feared monster who hunts men. On the other, the revered Hindu goddess Kali, a divine warrior who destroys demons. Think about it. Both are tied to death and chaos. Both can be absolutely terrifying, with long fangs and claw-like hands. Kali is worshipped as a force of cosmic justice, someone who gets drunk on the blood of her enemies to protect the world. The Churel is hated and feared for doing something that's, well, strikingly similar, just on a much more personal scale.
So in the end, we're left with this question. What really separates the monster from the goddess? Is it just a matter of perspective? The legend of the Churel forces us to ask whether she's a terrifying demon that needs to be locked away, a tragic victim we should pity, or maybe a dark goddess of vengeance, delivering a brutal kind of justice that society itself failed to provide. What you decide says as much about the legend as it does about us.